Take a close look at this scene. What do you think you see? Maybe footage taken in the evening by a drone flying over a pond with a rocky shoreline? That's about what it looks like, right? But what you're really seeing is a strange sight in the deep sea, about 2,100 feet down in the Gulf of Mexico to be precise. It's a pond of sorts, but of water that's super salty because there's a salt deposit beneath it. And the saltier water is, the heavier it is. The saltiness of water is called its salinity, and this is probably one of the most extreme examples of what salinity can do to the environment. The extra salty water, known as brine, is so heavy it can't mix with the ocean water above it, so it forms this pool. As you can see, it makes for an incredibly surreal view, but it can be a dangerous place. Most aquatic animals are adapted to live in water that is within a certain salinity range. Brine pools are so salty they can kill fish that swim into them. But the bulk of the ocean is much less salty and much more friendly to ocean life. Its salinity is about 35 parts of salt in every 1,000 parts of water. That usually only changes when you get close to the coast, like the places where rivers flow into the ocean mixing fresh water with seawater. The salinity of the water has a lot to do with who lives where. Most fish are adapted to freshwater or saltwater. You don't see goldfish in the ocean, and you don't see tuna in lakes, though certain fish can handle both. Have you ever wondered why that is? First, you have to understand how fish can live in the water at all, and that leads us to two key concepts, diffusion and osmosis.
Diffusion is the movement of a substance from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration, making a uniform distribution. Osmosis is diffusion, but through a semi-permeable membrane, which is any membrane that allows certain molecules, but not others, to pass through. Water diffuses from an area of high concentration, pushing through the semi-permeable membrane, to an area of low concentration, causing the water level to rise. The water rises until it reaches a level where its weight pushes back with a pressure equal to that of the water pushing through the membrane. This is called the osmotic pressure of the solution. So where does osmosis actually happen? In cells. A cell contains water and larger molecules like sugars, salts, and proteins, all surrounded by a semi-permeable membrane. The water can move or diffuse through the membrane, but the other molecules can't because they're too large. Because of this, the water molecules will diffuse to areas where there is less water. When the solution inside a cell equals the osmotic pressure of the solution outside the cell, then the solutions are isotonic. Iso means equal. If the solution outside the cell is dilute compared to that inside the cell, then it is hypotonic. Hypo means less than normal. Because the concentration of water is greater outside the cell than inside, water diffuses into the cell. If the solution outside the cell is more concentrated than that inside the cell, then it is hypertonic. Hyper means more than normal. In this case, the concentration of water is greater inside the cell, and water diffuses out of the cell. So how does osmosis actually affect us? Have you ever been thirsty? That's because your cells are in a hypertonic solution, and water is diffusing out of them, causing dehydration. If you were ever stuck on a desert island, you couldn't drink salt water because it's hypertonic and your cells would shrivel. So how do saltwater fish survive? They drink salt water all the time, but they have a trick that we don't. They can remove the salt and excrete it in their pee and out their gills. On the other hand, freshwater fish live in a hypotonic solution and have the opposite challenge. Their cells are saltier than their surroundings, so water is constantly rushing into their cells. To keep their cells from swelling or bursting, freshwater fish pee out lots of very dilute urine while their gills absorb salt to promote an isotonic state. There isn't very much salt in freshwater, but there is a little, and freshwater fish are very good at absorbing it. Most fish can only do one or the other. Put a tuna in the pond down the street, and it's going to die. Drop a goldfish on a coral reef, and it'll die too. Put either one in that brine pool, and they'll be toast. But thankfully, the tuna and the goldfish are perfectly adapted for where they actually live, thanks to osmosis. And there are some fish that can handle both freshwater and normal saltwater, meaning their bodies can switch from one technique to the other, from salty urine to diluted urine and vice versa. But it typically takes them a little while to make the switch, or as scientists say, acclimate. That's easy enough if you are, say, salmon, which live in the ocean but swim upstreams to lay eggs, because they can make the switch as they move through the zone where there's a mix of ocean salt water and a stream's fresh water. Of course, fish are just the start. There are all kinds of plants that can only live in certain salinities, and other animals have to have related techniques for keeping their insides in order when they're in salty water. So, if you want to figure out aquatic life, salt is a good place to start.